Hello and welcome. My name is DM Bob Yo, and I'm here today to help you learn to navigate the D&D Beyond character sheet. So I'm excited to have you here. Make sure and listen at the end for information about my Facebook page and the free games that I run online, as well as my paid sessions. All right, so to get to your character from the D&D Beyond homepage, after you've logged in, you're going to go to Collections, My Characters. Now, once that screen comes up, you can either edit a character or you can view. And we're going to go ahead and hit view on Valwis Galanadel. We're going to take a look at this Aladrin wizard that I built a little bit earlier today. And if you haven't watched my video on creating a new character on D&D Beyond, make sure you get that one and subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. All right, so first thing that we see then is the character sheet. In the upper left-hand corner, we have character name, the race, class, and level. And we would have a picture here if I'd selected one. I haven't, though, so we're not going to worry about editing that. And so what I want to look at first is the row of ability scores. Right across the top, we have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Now, we discussed all of the ability scores in the character creation video. I want to spend a few minutes learning how to use those for ability checks. Now, what's an ability check? Well, it really is just a check. It's a roll to see if you have the ability to do something that you want to do. So, for example, a strength check might mean something like trying to push a door open. If you find a contraption or an invention in a dungeon and the dungeon master says, describes it to you, so you see it there on the table, you might say, well, can I tell how it works? And so the dungeon master might say, make an intelligence check. So to make an intelligence check, you simply left click on intelligence, and D&D Beyond will roll the dice for you. Roll a d20, and it will add the result, and it'll tell you your intelligence check rolled a 5, added 3 for a total of 8. And you can do this with any of your various abilities. So you can do it with strength. Now, Laoshan, as a wizard, his strength is pretty low. So he rolled a 5 and he had a -1 of 4. He's not going to be pushing any doors open anytime soon, and that's okay. That's why wizards keep fighters around, is to open doors for them. So the next thing I want to look at after the ability scores is something called saving throws. And you'll find saving throws right below the ability scores here in this box. And at the bottom, of course, it says saving throws. Now, saving throws are similar to ability checks. They're based off all of your abilities: STR for strength, DEX for dexterity, CON for constitution, CHA for charisma, and so on. And just like with ability checks, if you click on, let's say your DM says make a constitution saving throw, you click, it will roll the dice, give you the total, show you the modifier. Now, it's important to note that saving throws are different than ability checks. Saving throws are a roll or a throw of the dice to save you from something happening to you. So if an evil wizard casts a charm spell on you, your DM might say, go ahead and make a wisdom check. And you would click on your a wisdom saving throw, and you would click on the wisdom saving throw. If you drink a vial and it turns out to be poison, the DM might say, make a constitution saving throw. All right. And same thing. Now, similar to ability checks is in this tall box here, tallest box on the D&D Beyond character sheet. You have all your skills: acrobatics, animal handling, arcana, athletics, deception, history, insight, so on. Now, skill checks are very similar to ability checks. They're actually a specialized type of ability checks. So for example, let's say my wizard finds a contraption, and it's not just a contraption, but he thinks it might be magical. The dungeon master might say, okay, make an Arcana skill check. So we click the modifier, the dice rolls, and we see in the right-hand corner, we have a 12 for our Arcana check. Another example might be the wizard wants to walk across a tightrope over a great cavern. And so instead of just a regular dexterity check, going to make an acrobatics check. So once again, click, and we get a result. If you have a black dot next to on the left-hand side of a skill, it means you're proficient. And same thing with the saving throws. Some saving throws you're proficient with. What that means is you get to add your proficiency bonus, which is located up top to the right of your ability scores. You add that to the roll. So Arcana is the intelligence bonus +3. It's proficient, so it adds an additional +2 for a total of +5. Now, you don't have to select these on the character sheet. You select them during the character creation process that we went through in the first video. All right, a couple of other boxes to look at. We mentioned proficiency bonus. Let's look at walking speed. In Dungeons & Dragons, the typical character can move 30 feet on their turn. Some can move 25, some can move a little faster, but the average is 30. Inspiration is a tool that your dungeon master may or may not use, so I will leave that at their discretion to explain that to you fully, but essentially an inspiration is a little bit of extra boost to your character in a situation, and usually you get inspiration from having accomplished something. Now, hit points. Hit points represent the amount of health that your character has, the amount of damage that they can take. Should they take damage, you simply type, let's say they take 3 hit points of damage, type in 3, hit the damage button, and you can see that the current hit point goes down to 4. Later on, the cleric casts a healing spell on them, and they regain up to as many as 8 hit points. Put 8 and heal, and it will cure it up to the max. You have some boxes that say defenses and conditions. For the most part, you're not going to worry about those as a new player. Sometimes you might have some resistances. Resistance means that just from a specific type of damage, you only take half damage. So if you have one there and you take a certain that type of damage, maybe it says resistance fire. If you take damage from a fire source, you only take half of the damage. Next, I'd like to look at over on the left-hand side, again underneath saving throws. There's a box that says senses. Now, it mentions perception, passive wisdom, perception, passive intelligence, investigation, and passive wisdom, insight. These are numbers that your DM might use and ask for at the beginning of an adventure or later on in the adventure. And they're used for the DM to just get a good idea of how perceptive or insightful or how good of an investigator your character is. And sometimes your dungeon master will make rolls against those numbers in secret. And then it also mentions if you have any specific senses, such as dark vision, the ability to see in the dark, and how far. Below that, you have proficiencies in languages. As is pretty typical, wizards aren't proficient in armor. If you have a fighter, it might say heavy armor, medium armor, light armor. Weapons for a wizard are very limited, and they're listed individually. If you are another class, it might list categories of weapons, such as simple weapons, martial weapons, that sort of thing. And then, of course, languages. When your dungeon master later on asks what languages you speak, you can find it here. All right, now we're going to jump over to the largest box on the D&D Beyond character sheet. And this box up top has actions, spells, equipment, features and traits, description, notes, and extras. We're going to start on actions. Underneath actions, you'll see each weapon that you have. And then it'll have a range, in this case 5 feet for the only weapon my wizard has, and hit/DC, and then damage. Now, sometimes you'll have two different numbers for damage. If you do, the first or the lowest number is for one-handed use of that weapon. The higher number is for two-handed use. Now, if we were to go into equipment, for example, and into manage equipment, and let's say we wanted to add a dagger, for example, for this character, we could do that, and we see it appeared down here, and we want to click on it in order to make sure it's active and equipped. Now we would go back over to actions, and we can see that the dagger is a melee weapon, which means it can be used up close. Then it also has a range. Range is 20, that means 20 feet. And it means any target within 20 feet, you can throw the dagger and attempt to hit without any trouble. If it is more than 20 but less than 60 feet, the number in parentheses, you have disadvantage on the roll. Now, we haven't talked about advantage and disadvantage. In Dungeons & Dragons, sometimes conditions are especially favorable or unfavorable for making some sort of an action or check. And when they are very favorable, you have advantage. When they're unfavorable, you have disadvantage. So on your hit/DC, in order to roll, you just click, and it will roll an attack with our dagger. And we see we had a 4 on the dice, and plus 5 is equal to 9. Now, if we want to attack with disadvantage, because it's farther than 20 but closer than 60 feet, we can right-click. And you'll see that you can choose advantage, regular roll, or disadvantage. So we click disadvantage, rolls 2 dice. Now they both happen to be a 2. Let's use another example, though. What you can see, it says to whichever is lower, plus 5 is 7. You can also roll with advantage or disadvantage on skills. Perhaps the conditions are very favorable when crossing that tightrope. Maybe you're using a pole to help yourself balance, and so the Dungeon Master might say, go ahead and make an acrobatics check with advantage. So just like on your hit/DC for your weapon, you'd right-click, and you can select advantage to make the roll. And we'll have 2 different numbers this time, an 11 and a 16, and we see that it took the higher of the 2 numbers. Okay, now, up to this point, we've only rolled with the D20. That's the most common dice in Dungeons & Dragons. We haven't rolled with any dice other than that. So we're going to do that now. If we click on our damage, we'll see that it rolls a 4-sided dice and adds the modifier, the +3. And it tells us that we got a 5 total. If you ever need to roll other dice, down here in the lower left-hand corner, you click on that. And there are a number of dice to choose from. If your Dungeon Master says, roll me a D8, you can simply click and then roll. And an 8-sided die will come across the screen, and you'll get your result over in the lower right-hand corner. Now, there are other options listed under actions. If you have spells, they are all listed here. We're going to ignore spells for the moment. I'll have a third video that you can watch if you are a spellcaster that will help you cover those. And really, at this point, we've covered pretty much all of the important areas on the character sheet. There are many others that you can look at. For example, you can look at all these different options under actions. You can look at your features and traits to see what kind of obviously the features and skills and things that you, or abilities that you picked with your race, class, and background. You can also go to equipment, and as I showed you earlier, you can add equipment by hitting manage. You can add to your money by clicking on currency. And for example, add 1 platinum piece. Now I neglected to mention initiative. Now initiative has to do with how quickly you respond in combat. So at the beginning of combat, everybody rolls initiative. And the dungeon master then has all of the characters as well as the opponents, monsters or whatever they might be, roll initiative. And so whoever has the highest number goes first, second highest goes next, the lowest one goes last. Also, there is your armor class, also known as AC. Your DM might ask you for that from time to time if someone is trying to attack you. All right, so this concludes our brief overview of the D&D Beyond character sheet. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you are planning on playing a spellcasting class, make sure and watch the next video in the series on picking and using spells on the D&D Beyond character sheet. Also visit me, DM Bob Yo, B-O-B-Y-O, on Facebook. You can also find me on startplaying.games, where you can schedule free character creation sessions as well as a free adventure in my world of Obsidian Shards, where you'll also learn to use the Fantasy Grounds virtual tabletop software at no cost to you. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you out in the world.